English teacher at Orchard Park Secondary School. Today we're going to talk about writing a news story in order to prepare for the Ontario Secondary School Literacy Test. Normally on the literacy test, you're going to get a picture and oftentimes a headline as well. And the instructions for you will be to write a news story based on that picture and headline. Now, the marking system for this is interesting, and it's something that the student should know a little bit about. You don't get marked the same way that you do in a regular classroom. That is, you don't get a percentage grade. You don't get a mark out of 50 or 100 or anything like that. Instead, you get a score. The score on the news story is a range from 0 to 60. The score that you're going to receive is an indicator of the degree to which you have successfully developed the topic using the writing form that you've been asked to employ for that section. When you are writing a news story, a score of 0 would mean that you didn't write anything at all. It's important to remember to use the inverted pyramid format when you're writing a news story. This is one of those things that a number of students who aren't successful will forget. If you look at the first example, this received a score of 10. Remember, this is a score of 10 out of a possible 60. Seems to all be written in one block of text. It says, my dad was on his way from work on a rainy day. He did not reach home on time because of traffic, so he took a shortcut home and got his car all muddy. If you take a look at that first sentence, you see that it starts off poorly. It says, for example, my dad. Well, unfortunately, your dad isn't a particularly newsworthy person. Most news stories have to have a degree of newsworthiness, and a reporter probably isn't going to write in the first person. The spelling mistakes in that opening bit as well are a barrier to understanding, and also demonstrates a rather significant lack of English fundamentals. As this develops, it seems as if the student is considering bits of information that are probably important and is considering those bits as he writes or as she writes. This is another problem. It suggests a lack of organization. A more effectively written news story is going to have very clear, newsworthy details as it begins. In essence, this first one, which received a low score, sounds like a personal anecdote as opposed to a well-written, well-developed, newsworthy story which follows the inverted pyramid format. The second selection has a much more clear focus on an event. It's not great and received a score of 30 out of a possible score of 60. One of the reasons why is because the supporting details are insufficient and vague. It makes claims such as enough money. Well, enough money isn't a number. We don't really know what enough would be. And because this is all made up anyway, there's no reason why the student couldn't put a number in there which demonstrates some understanding of what enough may be. It makes another claim about it being a successful car wash fundraiser. Well, again, what determines success in this sense? In addition, there is some evidence of organization where two ideas are linked together, the idea there being enough money, and then claiming later that there's $1.5 million. However, a successfully written news story is not going to repeat itself. It won't say enough money at one point and then $1.5 million later. One of the things that happens in any effectively written news story is that there is economical use of language. Things are stated precisely and carefully in order to not repeat any ideas as it goes. In addition, this selection waits until late in order to declare what date this event occurred. Most news stories will probably be written about yesterday, because that's when most of the news you would see in a newspaper would have actually occurred. The final example, and the most successful one, which received a score of 60 out of a possible 60, even just looking at it, you can tell that this is someone who seems to have a better understanding of how a news story is supposed to be written. You can see that there are 5 distinctly developed paragraphs. You can see that in the first sentence, it says a group of Ontario teens who heard about the events in Haiti, decided to hold a car wash to raise money on April 7, 2010. The who, what, where, why, and when are all very clearly outlined in that first sentence. Each new sentence, each new paragraph, continues to develop the idea, adding additional information to the selection. The student clearly indicates where one thought ends and another begins by using paragraphs effectively, and uses the entirety of the space allotted for this writing selection. This is what you need to do in order to be successful on the news story component of the literacy test. A couple of additional details to remember about writing a news story is that they should be written essentially almost like a list of facts. You don't want to write things in chronological order, for example. If you're going to write about a bank robbery that had occurred, you don't start out by writing about the teller's morning and what she ate for breakfast and what her drive to work was like. You don't want to write it with a narrative arc to it. You're relating facts, and that's all. Another thing you want to remember is you don't include opinion. The newspaper, for example, would never write, "We really hope that the robber gets caught." Of course they would hope that the robber gets caught, but that's inflicting opinion, and sometimes a news reporter is going to have to write about horrific things, which are obviously terrible. Those things will be clear to anyone who's reading it. Another thing to avoid doing is concluding. Because of the inverted pyramid format, it's supposed to be written in such a way that the end of the story can be cut off without losing anything important. So you don't end with something like, "We really hope Little Billy pulls through." Of course you would hope that Little Billy pulls through, but you don't write that at the end. It's assumed that the information needed for whoever's reading that selection is going to be present in what you've actually written.